how could I justify to Elon Musk that like when they go to Mars they should bring some reptiles? You know, I mean, like it's so dumb and fantastical, but like that's kind of where my head's at because there's gonna be something there. Like there's gonna be something. Somebody's gonna find something in a frog or like pull Ozempic out of a Gila monster or like whatever, and it turns out it's gonna be perfect for the Martian existence or something. You know?
A few days ago, I was having lunch with some people, and of course, inevitably, somebody brings up that I have snakes, and I never bring it up, but people do, and I think because people are always fascinated by this sort of thing, and now I'm sort of left with having to explain myself, or why I keep and what I keep, and people are always blown away. But I got a question from somebody that I almost always get when we discuss reptiles with the non-reptile keeping people, and I'm sure you get this as well, is why do you keep them? What do you do with them? Why do you have them? And sometimes it's like there's not a knee-jerk answer to that or an immediate response because sometimes we don't really even know how to verbalize why you keep a snake. Where if you were to keep fish, nobody's going to say, why do you keep fish? It's just almost inherent in the fact that somebody might keep fish because they enjoy interacting with the fish tank and they enjoy the beauty of a fish tank. Or with reptile and amphibian keeping and really any exotic animal keeping, it's really not necessarily explicit why somebody does it. So anyway, that's a long way of introducing today's guest. Today I'm talking to Phillip Lietz. He's a member. He's been on the show several times. I think this is his 5th or 6th episode. Of course, he hosts another podcast with Roy on the Animals at Home network called Project Herpetoculture. Fantastic show. Definitely go check that out. I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. But today we discuss really the why of herpetoculture, and we weave through so many different philosophical and ethical discussions. We discuss where we are compared to aquaculture, fish keeping. We discuss the history of feeder insects, the double standard that we have in society with invasive species. The reptile industry is often charged with being the reason for many different invasive species. You know, how often do we hear about Burmese pythons in the Everglades? Well, simultaneously, your neighbor's cat has killed 30 birds last year and nobody cares. There's that double standard. That's fascinating. And then Phil walks us through why he thinks herpetoculture is actually a form of time travel, which is a fascinating thing. I'm not going to even expand on it right here. We'll let him expand on it when we get to that point in the conversation. So if you're somebody who likes philosophical, ethical discussions, then you'll definitely want to listen to this episode. Enjoy. The following is a paid advertisement for True Chroma by Faunalux. Did you know that most of the LED lights on the market for reptile keeping are designed for human eyes and not for reptile eyes? Reptiles perceive their visual world in a completely different way than we do because they have a fourth cone, a fourth visual receptor that allows them to perceive light in the ultraviolet spectrum. The Faunalux True Chroma Spot LED is the world's first lamp to utilize trademark reptile vision technology to cater to our animals. With a wide visible spectrum output, high color rendering, and natural proportions of essential UVA1 light, your animal experiences richer color, improved awareness, and better welfare. It's that simple. True Chroma is laboratory tested, used in zoos, built to last, and they fit right into your standard ceramic screw-in fixture. It's precision lighting designed for reptiles, birds, and other exotic pets. True Chroma by Faunalux, educated by nature. Head to fauna-lux.com for more information. Well, Phil, welcome back to the podcast. I'm just trying to remember, is this the third? This is maybe the 4th episode.
I think it's 4 now.
This is 4, yeah.
No, it might even be more because we did.
Yes, that's right.
We've done 3, just the 2 of us, 2 with you, me, and Roy, and then this one. So yes. It might be 6.
6. You're right. I think it's 6.
Getting up there. It's great.
It's crazy because, I mean, I just remember like recording the very first one with you, and I want to say that was like the Summer Olympics in 21, maybe. It was like middle of COVID. It's just crazy how quickly that time went by. It's like instantly now it's 2025. So time flies.
Yeah. It really rips by way faster than you want it to. I'll tell you that much. And it just seems like faster as you get older. It's like, God, I'm already halfway through 2025. Good Lord.
I know.
It's insane. Yeah.
It really, awesome. Yeah. It's good that we're able to kind of continue to do it, but yeah, it definitely goes by fast. Can you give us a little update on Arids only? Like, what are you up to? What's changed? I think the last time we talked was maybe about a year ago now.
Yeah, something along those lines. So since then, I have moved from the shop space where I was doing work, and my wife and I bought a house, and so we moved the animals into the basement. And that's just been a huge weight off my shoulders in terms of just everything from like the amount of time investment and driving and time away from home and my ability to respond instantaneously to something happening downstairs. I mean, I can't tell you how many times over the last 5 years that I've been in that shop where I've like done a whole day's work at the shop, gone to my other job, worked 6, 7 hours there, get off, teach my last class, finish training at 9 about, and then look at my cameras and something's laid eggs and I have to drive an hour all the way back down to the shop, work for another 30, 40 minutes to get the eggs out in the incubator and stuff, and then get to go home and go to sleep. And a lot of very late nights and very early mornings. And so I am really, really relieved to have that as that's the primary change. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the,
that's awesome. Do you still have
yeah.
someone coming to help you out? Like, will somebody come to your home to help run it, or are you able to
Not
do most of that on your
anymore.
own now?
No, Brendan, he's a great guy. He ended up also getting another job working, I think, with animal control. So, he he'll still help me out like when I go out of town or something. Like, uh, I think like a month ago, my wife and I went to Salida up in the mountains here in Colorado, and
Mm.
we went up for this. It's actually this really cool festival called FibArc. It's a it stands for like the first boats and rafts in the Arkansas River, but it's like shortened to FibArc, and it's like this big festival where they let extra water out of the dam so the river gets real ripping, and they have people like do obstacle courses and slaloms through on paddle boards and kayaks and rafts, and they do all these games, and there's food and breweries and just a part live music. It was so cool. So anyway, he helped during that time. He watched the stuff while I was gone, but now it's back to just me flying 100% solo, doing all the dirty work.
Did you have to downsize at all, or did the basement basically hold everything that you wanted to keep?
Yeah, yeah. So I did. So I didn't technically downsize. I did retire a few breeders who had been with me for like 10 or 15 years. So, but it was only like 5 or 6. So I still have like the same total number of producing animals of each species. And all I did was I compressed the space just a little bit. So when I moved into the shop, I went the opposite direction. I expanded all the cages and made them really, really big. And that's great. And it was fun and it was valuable and I learned a lot. But it becomes challenging at a certain scale to have that much um, infrastructure, you know?
Mm.
So by moving back in here, I actually reduced some of the cage sizes just a little bit. And not much. They still got plenty of space, but just slight reduction in overall cage size. And I no longer have some of the large species that I used to, like the Egyptian Uromastyx and some of these others. I sent those to Ty Park down in Florida because he was going to give him a 15-foot pen. So I was like,
Mm.
well, can't compete with that. And I didn't really want to produce big lizards anymore, like
Yeah.
big lizards like that. That's a huge animal. So that changed. And so the space, it feels a little smaller, but it's mostly just compressed. Same stuff though.
Did you have to like? Did you just move the stuff that you had into the basement, or did you have time to like kind of set the shop up or like the basement up in a way? Like, did you like when you say you changed the enclosures? Did you build new enclosures, or what did you do? Like, because it's just
Yeah,
so much.
yeah.
I can't imagine how much work it was.
Oh, dude. Yeah, it was. So the first time I moved from like my family's home into the shop, that was brutal. Like it was one of the most brutal moves I've ever done. I didn't have to build anything. It was just hauling stuff and moving it, whatever. That was terrible. And then moving in this time, um, it was still the same amount of work, but like I had some people helping me, like Brendan, and then a friend of his helped me out with the move. So it was a little bit lighter, but we did a ton of work. So my wife and we did some demolition and remodel on the upstairs of the house. And then we did I did a bunch of stuff in the basement. I had to rip up all the carpet, seal the floors with floor leveler, um, ripped off some of the crown molding. I had to break an entire, the basement had a brick bar from when the
Mm.
house was built, and it was solid brick and cement all the way to the foundation. And I had to take a sledgehammer to that brick bar and just beat the shit out of it, haul it all upstairs in buckets. And oh, dude,
That's
I did it.
brutal.
Yeah, we did a ton of stuff. I had an electrician buddy of mine come through and put um, exposed conduit or
Mm.
to and I had him rearrange the way the electricity hits the panel so that way everything was a little more
Distributed.
coherent and distributed. So yeah, it was a ton of work. I didn't build any new cages, but what I did was I basically put some dividers in existing large enclosures, and then I went through and I resealed everything with new silicon and then like patched up some of the big melamine boxes were like totally beat up just from years of use and moving, you know. So I like cleaned up the corners and sealed it with wood glue and like sealed some of the holes and cracks on the inside that had appeared over time with sealant and stuff. So everything got like a makeover and a bit of a refurbish. And I got to really take my time, taking what I'd learned both previously being in a basement when I was living with my family, and then moving everything into a shop and dealing with the infrastructure work there, and then bringing that back into a space that I get to more or less customize again and just kind of start from a fresh spot. So it was a huge undertaking and it was a lot of work, but yeah, it ended up being such a great boon for my state of mind. And I mean, dude, I had these cages that I had built at these 8 by 5 foot pens that I was keeping some stuff in, and the craftsmanship on those was so bad. Like it was so bad. Like if you ever came there, you'd see like these big gap, like literally a piece of melamine here would match up with a piece of melamine here. And there's like a 2 or 3 inch jut of
Like
melamine
nothing's
for
flush and
yeah, nothing's flush. Exactly. It was total carnage. And so now everything's clean. The cord management and distribution is exactly the way I want it. And now that I'm here, I have some other stuff I'm going to do too. Like, I'm going to build some custom large pens for my San Esteban Island iguanas, for them because they're in great enclosures as it is, but I want to give them something like really impressive. And I have an egress in the basement that has a real heavy lid on it, but the sun comes through. So I'm thinking about connecting the custom enclosure for the iguanas to that egress so they can have part-time outdoor living.
that's cool.
A small egress, but they get natural sun as a part of that'd be a win. And then I'm going to play around with building some outdoor stuff in the backyard. So that way, because there's pretty favorable weather here for say 8, 9 months of the year for like my Moroccan Greek tortoises, and some of these others. I have just a handful of species that could spend some time outside each year. Not all the time, but sometimes.
Yeah.
And then long term, what I'd like to do in the next 3 to 5 years is build an outbuilding in the side yard. Maybe like I don't know, like a 20 by 15 building out there on a slab of concrete, and be able to like expand into that also, because I do want to grow a little bit more from where I'm at, but I don't want to get not much more.
Yeah.
So
You don't want to have to go get another shop.
yeah, not right now anyway. I mean, that's another possibility I've thought about, like trying to raise sufficient funds so I could buy a commercial building and then potentially just rent out other units and get it to pay for my mortgage or something like that on that space, but have it be mine that I own and build equity in. I am thinking about that, but I don't have the money to do that right now. So that's
Yeah.
all a different possibility that's theoretically on the horizon. It just depends.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
are you working with any new projects? Like, is there any new animals that you're working with or species?
Just a couple. So this still the big mainstays are the Uromastyx, the Xenogama, and like Chuckwallas, things like this. But I've added a couple new things like desert iguanas. So I have Dipsosaurus dorsalis now, and actually pretty confident one of the females is gravid, and so should sometime in the next couple of weeks, I think she should lay a clutch of eggs. And if she does, and if they're good, I mean, I've never bred them before, so that'd be really, really cool. Big step for me. And then I guess you could, even though I've been keeping the San Esteban Island iguanas for 2.5 years or so, I've only just now gotten most of them to the point where they're really handleable and like easy to hand feed and make good content. And they when they're juveniles, they look basically like your typical spiny-tailed iguana juvenile. But when they get into their adult color form, they're quite something. They're quite special. I don't know if you're familiar, but black heads and arms, and then like a white and black speckled back and torso, and then black and white striped hindquarters and legs, and then like white and black striped tail. So they're like quite stunning and really unique. They're quite rare. They're not very big for a spiny, like they're a spiny tailed iguana, but they're like, around that pectinata size where they're, they could be like 3 feet long, but they're not going to get really, really big bodied.
Mhm.
Um, and so those are somewhat new. I haven't bred them yet, but I'm expecting to produce some of those next season. Those are just way, way cool iguanas, by the way.
So where did you end up picking those up?
There's the male I got from Ty Park. He raised him outside, and I got him a few years ago. And then the two females I got from a guy named Curtis Toolson in Arizona. I think he keeps all his stuff outside, and he has a couple of pairs of the San Estebans, and they produced. And so I grabbed some females from him, and they're epic, epic lizards. They are any of the reptiles from that island are kind of sporadically available. You have your San Esteban Island chuckwallas, and then the related Angel Island chuckwallas, and then the San Esteban Island spiny-tailed iguanas. None of them are easily found or sourced. The iguanas more so than the chuckwallas, but they they just sort of fit the brand for me, if you will. Like they're a high desert, mostly herbivorous, but somewhat omnivorous reptile that uh, has a spiny tail that happens to be like popular and people like them, but they're not produced in large numbers or with very high consistency, right? So I'm hoping I can change that. It's in the future. There's still a new project, but there's plenty of people who've produced them. Don't get me wrong, but it's just that they're not the kind of thing that's bred every single year with regularity and dependability over a long stretch of time.
Yeah, yeah. You're not gonna necessarily see it at your next expo type thing.
Yeah. No, not exactly, not at all, unless I'm
And they're
there
not
with.
huge, like you mentioned. They're not. It's a smaller species.
Yep. Yeah. They're nowhere near as big as an Egyptian, that's for sure. But yeah, but they're medium sized. I mean, a pretty big. My male, he's a hefty boy, and if if he got a hold of you, he could cause some damage. But like they're so most of them are very, very relaxed, like really friendly, trusting lizards. You can just and they're so intelligent. You can get them to understand so much that they just really fit the bill.
Now, what about chuckwallas? I feel like we've not actually talked about them before with
Oh,
you, but I know that you. I feel like you have a deep passion for them, just like with your history of. I think like herping is a young person finding them, or what. Maybe you could fill us in on that. I might be
yeah,
wrong there, but I'm curious. Like those are a fairly large lizard as well. So maybe you could just walk us
yeah.
through that species.
Yeah, definitely. So, like, brief overview, you have the chuckwalla is a North American desert herbivore. They exist from Mexico and Baja, Mexico, up into California, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and they are sort of like the U.S. Um, ecological allegory to the Uromastyx. They again just high desert, crevice dwelling, mostly herbivores, small to medium sized. All the chucks that exist on the mainland are all uh, Soromalis ater. They used to be kind of subclassified with like obesus and some other little mixes in there, but they group the entire mainland set into one species, Soromalis ater, and then you have some island species. The San Esteban Island is, like Hispidus varius, and then, Soromalis varius, and then Soromalis hispidus is the Angel Island chuckwalla. And then there's some Cloudberi and Clemeri, I think, some of these other island chucks that are distinct, but they are just a wonderful, wonderful lizard. A ton of rich history with a lot of the native groups that ate them or just interacted with them, right? Um, Really cool, great pets, hardy, easy to care for, bulletproof in a lot of ways, smaller than a bearded dragon. You can
Oh,
get
they're smaller
some.
than a bearded dragon.
Yep. Yeah.
Hmm.
Or roughly the same size, depending. So you have like some variation in the mainland chucks where like say granite chuckwallas, they can get a pretty big adult size compared to other chucks, but they're still not that big. You know, they don't get as long as a bearded dragon and their bodies aren't quite as big. Again, there's some variability in there. You have some small dragons and you have some big chucks, but on average a little smaller than a bearded dragon. Yeah. But they're awesome. Really cool animals to work with and keep and breed. And again, really quite bulletproof. Like as long as you give them crevices and high heat, they will do very well. Very resilient little critters, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and they look really cool. How
Yeah.
different do the locality, like the island locality or subspecies, look?
Oh man, totally different. So
Really?
yeah, Sormalis varius is the again the San Esteban Island chucks, and they are so those in the Angel Islands get huge. Those things get like 3 feet long and 10 pounds, like massive lizards. So they're
Wow.
island gigantism, right? Um, but those ones look really different. They are like a calico, so they're like patchy black, orange, white. That's the San Esteban chuck, and then you have the Angel Island chuck, which has like slightly spiny scales, real slightly spiny, and they're jet black, and really cool. And then the mainland ones, they split by locality, um, but there's basically different color types. So you have redbacks, granites, yellowtails, carrot tail chucks, which only exist on South Mountain and are protected. And then you have like just a ton speckled chucks, like tons of different variety, but it's not just by locale because the color types, like you can find redbacks in Arizona, you can also find them in California. So like they're kind of all over the place, but each locale has like a distinct type,
Mhm.
generally speaking, you know?
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
super
I feel
cool.
like I've never. I think I've seen them maybe once at the Palm Desert Zoo in Palm Springs, but other than that,
Yeah.
I've never seen one in captivity or anything. So it seems like an animal that should be more popular in the hobby, considering they don't get huge and they're so
Yeah.
bulletproof.
They're getting there. Yeah, they are getting there. But you know, it's always you got to be careful because like it just like with any of the US native species, there's just so much variety in the way the regulation falls around
Yes.
where you can have them, right? And where they can be. So like I obviously never sell like I just every time someone asks about chucks, I always say, hey, just remember I can't sell to you if you're in any of the states where they're native, you know? And people, I'd say 50% of the time people don't realize that. And they're like, oh, I didn't know. And I'm like, well, sorry, can't sell it to you, you know, but you know, the rest of the states, they're great. So they're just super cool, man. And there's some more people keeping them now, and then there's a few people breeding them. But again, yet again they're kind of on brand where you know sporadic availability, rarely produced consistently and regularly over a long period of time. So just another thing I'm looking to kind of it's like a little gap I'm looking to fill, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we jump into some of the topics that you if anyone follows your Instagram page, you'll always see once I don't know, maybe like once every 10 days or something, Phil will pop up like a thought that is usually a pretty well developed couple of slides that you've spent time thinking about. So I don't know where these thoughts come from. You do spend a lot of time just thinking about herpetoculture in general, I feel like.
I do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess a lot of this started when Roy and I started the show, Project Herpetoculture, right? I had already been kind of thinking that herpetoculture as like a broad spectrum or broad industry was pretty unique in a lot of ways. And I'd always struggled with, you know, we've talked before about, I've always struggled with the kind of justification that people will offer for herpetoculture, like, oh, it's just because I can and it's cool, and how that doesn't feel sufficient. And so I think what ended up happening over time was the more people I would talk to who had interesting things to say, and the more I would learn from doing the show, and the more I thought about justifications for this, the more and more my thinking was pushed towards um, philosophical perspectives and the idea that what we're doing is like a nascent or new form of domestication. And so then the more I thought about this stuff, the more it just the the more the resulting connections between those ideas that were starting to generate from a philosophical perspective started to make their connections to the actual work that I'm doing over time. So like, um, you know, it's hard to pick like one specific example, but like, you know, in terms of thinking about like what values does herpetoculture add to human society, in an effort to try to justify it in a way that was more than just the production of animals. And so this is why one of the things I kept getting pushed towards is domestication. And so then part of the reason I started putting up some of these slides and these thoughts on my social media pages is because number one, I really wanted feedback from people. I wanted people to critique me because yeah, it might sound like a great idea to me, but like I'm just as dumb and in my own echo chamber as anybody else, right? So the only way to get like active feedback or any kind of critical discussion around it to maybe push my ideas in a better direction can only come from asking other people what they think. And so putting it out there helps with that. But then also, it was like some of it feels like I don't know. I know there are a lot of cool people doing really, really interesting things. And I'm sure there are people thinking about the same things that I am and more complex things that I am. But I don't necessarily see a lot of content or information that is from that particular point of view. Not a lot of like, call it writing on the topic of herpetoculture or philosophical perspectives on herpetoculture or trying to at least put out information that is intended to contribute to herpetoculture from a cognitive perspective that's not just a care guide or information about lighting or diet considerations, even though that's all part of it to a degree.
Yes,
So
yeah.
that's where all of the writing started coming from, you know?
Well, it is interesting because the herpetoculture in general doesn't have like, it's not obvious, and we've talked about this lots, but it's not obvious to outsiders why we do it. And maybe it is because there's like maybe a little bit of a lack of this type of discussion or this type of writing for people to cling on to. I mean, the other day I was having lunch at a swim meet I was coaching at and sitting with other coaches. Of course, it came up that I have snakes, which I never bring up. Somebody at the table always has to bring it up, so now I'm forced to talk about it. But which is totally fine. And so one of the coaches asked me like, "Why do you do it? Like why? Like what?" And she was genuinely interested, so it was nothing wrong with the question. But I just think like, if I had fish, that never would have been a question. If I had some other type of animal, like maybe I kept birds or whatever, or some other hobby that's maybe not even necessarily animal related, there's the question about why doing it isn't one that people bring up. So it's interesting that the non-keeper public, that's what they want to ask. I don't know if it's because of the type of animals we keep or the lack of this type of discussion. I don't know.
Well, so some of it, I totally relate, by the way. Like, inevitably when I'm in a group of people, someone's got to be like, this guy's got lizards in his basement, you know, or whatever. But it's the same thing with jujitsu and other circles. People are like, hey, let's go watch out. This guy trains jujitsu. He'll beat you up. And I'm like, I'm just hanging out here trying to have a good day like you. I don't know why you got to make it weird. But I think one of the reasons is because herpetoculture probably is the newest kind of, companion animal industry, like maybe outside like arachnid and insect, like arthropod keepers, right? That's probably a little newer, but like generally speaking, herpetoculture is really, really new. And even just as like a cultural institution or something that we do across generations, it's really, really, really new. Now there's lots of ancient examples of what one could call herpetoculture, right? But in the modern context, the modern instantiation of what I do, what you do, what Roy does, what all these people that we pay attention to are doing, it's really, really new. And so that's also part of why I feel like it's important to talk about it more and to have some of these more, I don't know, esoteric conversations about what we do, because if there's not, I want people to have like a better answer for like, why do you keep these things? It's like, and there's going to come a point. We all know that herpetoculture is growing, and it's almost every day where I meet a kid at the jiu-jitsu academy who's like, oh, I have a bearded dragon, and I'm like, hell yeah, like great, or I've got a Russian tortoise or something. Like, it's just getting more and more and more, and so it'd be great to have more interesting answers than I just like snakes, or I just like turtles, or whatever it is. And especially given the fact that there just like are so many negative, uh, negative slanted writings and headlines about the exotic industry, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
mostly negative. It's mostly like Joe Exotic, right? So it's like somebody's got to just talk. There are great people doing it in a great way and showing it and talking about it, but it's mostly just, most of it's just like content. It's like, I'm just going to go and jump on a snake in the Everglades, or like, not that that's bad. I'm just saying it's like, we all know, we all follow them.
Yes. Yeah.
So on some level, it just feels like, well, I might as well put my money where my mouth is and just do it,
Yeah.
and talk about it. I don't think that I'm necessarily the right person to do it, but I like talking about it. So, it doesn't bother me. And, to something specific, it's like, I think it's more interesting because when people ask me like, well, why do you do it? Well, I get to tell them because I've thought a lot about it. So I get to tell them something much more deep. It's like, well, part of what I like about it is I feel like I'm engaging with this other form of consciousness that we share the planet with. Like, it's an incredibly cool thing in a world where so much of human civilization has a tendency to push wildlife to the margins and, uh, you know, uh, uh, medicalize our surroundings. Um, I think the human consciousness is hungry for animal interaction. I've been reading tons of Paul Shepard's work, who, if people aren't familiar, maybe try The Others, his book called The Others, How Animals Make Us Human, or Coming Home to the Pleistocene, if it's something more if you find like the ancient human context interesting, that's a good one to read. But there's this idea that um, Paul Shepard would go even as far as to say that like a person can't develop like a full personality or scope of understanding without interaction with animals.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have grown up even 100 years ago, we would have grown up with much more direct and intimate relationships with many different kinds of wildlife. And that deeply shapes who we are as people. And so I think some of these more unique forms of companion animal interactions that are not dogs or cows or chickens or whatever, I think that's why they've become more and more interesting to people across the world, is because there's a hunger for the other thing, these other beings that have an experience that teach us about what we do and help illuminate aspects of our own consciousness that, people are hungry for it.
I'm just picturing the person at the cocktail party who just asked that question.
Yeah, and they're like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah.
I didn't want that answer, man. I just
Yeah.
want it because they're red or something.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. I mean, but it's
But
like,
it's so true. I want you to finish that thought as well,
yeah.
but I'd love for you to weave in this concept of time travel as well, because I think that's
Oh yeah.
perfect. It fits perfectly with this.
Yeah, it is a form of time travel, because in two ways. The first is because you're tapping into an awareness and a use of your own senses and interpretation of the world in a way that you would have on a much more regular basis 200,000 years ago, right? You as a human being entering this world, you already have inside of you all of the tools you need to interpret other beings. And so
Mhm.
you're exercising that. It's an exercise in empathetic enlargement when you're doing this. So that's a form of time travel. And then the other way is because every animal that you work with is the result of billions of years of biological development. And so when you get in tune with an animal's experience of their world, you are tuning into millennia and millions of years of evolutionary biology that was tuned for a specific way of being here. So it's a it is a kind of time travel in a way. Obviously, it's creative use of the time travel analogy, but that's what it is on some
Hmm.
level. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
uh, yeah. It's I feel like the more and more I think about it this way, the more obvious it seems on some level. Because I mean, even a dog, it's like, well, why do you have a dog? Right? I assume you have a dog, don't you?
I don't have a dog. I grew up with dogs, but I can't have a dog where I live right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, if you had a dog or you had a cat or a guinea pig, it's like, well, why do you have it? Well, I like it. They're kind of cool. Like this dog is really great. She's super cute and she's fun. She's a great companion. It's like, well, that's technically that is also true of our animals. Like this is
Yes.
a very cool companion, but none of that is unique just to herpetoculture. I have to do that with this dog, right? She is also the result of millions of years of evolutionary adaptation and change and restructuring. And so in order to take care of her better and understand her better, I have to do the same things. I have to understand how wolves and dogs came to be. I have to understand the effects of millennia of domestication and partnership with humans. I have to understand what the experience of a dog is like in order to train them properly, right? Because you can't just hit your dog, then you're just an asshole, right?
Hmm.
But if you understand what a dog understands about the world, how they interact with you, what they see as good and bad, and how do I get what I want in interaction with this monkey? Well, now you're much better. You're going to have a better relationship with your dog, and they're going to be more well behaved. Um, this is no different than what we do with the reptiles,
Yeah.
except the reptiles are lacking the millennia of partnership with humanity. Now, maybe in 500 years it will be less so, because my the whole theme of a lot of this leads to like we are domesticating these things and they're going to change a lot between now and 500 years from now, like a
Hmm.
lot, and probably a lot faster than dogs changed, because with dogs it was for all their different purposes and all the utility we can gain by partnering with dogs shaped them over time, and there was a lot of unintended shaping, and then there have been now what, like 300-400 years of very, well, actually longer than that, like millennia of like intentional shaping of dogs, right? To suit something specific. But now with the reptiles, it's going to happen faster because they have a higher turnover, like reproductive rate
Yeah.
on average. There's more of them. There's a lot more unique pressures on the animals than there may have been on dogs, because dogs all had very well-defined purposes to partner with people. With us, it's what do we want them to be? Like, how do I want to domesticate this animal? And so now you're back in the realm of ethics, which is the whole big controversy with reptiles, like how ethical can we do this? Well, as soon as you've got ethics as your guiding compass and you have that as a justification, well, now, okay, I can go forward here and say all the choices that I'm making now are with the long-term thinking of what are the animals that I have going to contribute to this same species in herpetoculture in 500 years, 1,000 years.
What do you think if you could peer into the window 500 years from now? What do you think like the ideal domesticated reptile would look like? Like, I mean, obviously, as far as behavior, or what do you think if you say domesticated reptile? What's happening there?
Um, that's a really good question. I have some thoughts, but I think the most honest answer would be I have no idea,
Hmm.
because, and I think the reason that's the right answer is because the all of the preferences that we have right now may not match the preferences and desires of people in 300 years. And so the needs of the animals that they partner with will be it's an ongoing feedback loop, right? So there's this niche construction theory, somewhat controversial, but it's basically the idea that for forever people kind of thought of animals as the passive recipients of the evolutionary pressures on them, right? But niche construction theory reframes it in a way that says, well, actually, the animal and the environment are co-creating a niche in a feedback loop. So in the
Hmm.
same way that if you have an environment that pushes animals to be a certain way, well, those animals have effects on the environment that then force the environment to change. And then that environment then feeds back into the animals and forces them to change as a result. So it's a loop. They both influence one another. Um, and it's a little controversial again, because some people say, well, that's the way it's always been. And I don't know enough to say whether that's true or not, but niche construction theory is a good metaphor, because that's what's going on in herpetoculture on some level. Like, there are all these ways that we're putting pressure on the animals, and then all these ways that the animals are informing the pressures that we put on them, right? So it's actually a uh, co-created process. And so I'm guessing it would be very hard to predict what a domesticate reptile would look like in 500 years. I do have some thoughts about it, though, because um, to get topical about it, let's pretend that AI really takes off and it doesn't destroy us all, and we get this odd utopic future, right? Or semi-utopic, quasi-utopic futuristic world. Um, I would imagine that there would be some pretty big shocks to herpetoculture, specifically with regard to gene editing and genetic manipulation of the animals in our care. So I've written a couple of highly speculative and stupid articles about the way that AI and gene editing technology could completely upend everything that we do. So let's just take the simple example of smuggling. Let's pretend that we live in a world where CRISPR gene editing technology has been democratized and all of us can make designer stuff in our homes. Well, all of a sudden, concerns around hybridization and endangered species go out the door, because if it's an endangered species, well, we have a catalog. We have a genetic catalog now. I can always make another tiger. So
Mm-hmm.
if we need more tigers, I'll just make some and we can put them in the world. If I need a Fiji crested iguana, I can make one and put it in the world. So the need for regulation of the trafficking of those things would change. Um, the way, right now, smuggling looks like uh, looking for lizards in suitcases and in people's pants and stuff like that, right? Well, what happens when the smuggling is genetic information on a flash drive or in the cloud? Well, it's very different now. What happens to the argument around hybrids muddying a gene pool when you already have a pure gene bank of exactly what you want on hand at any point in time? Well, now it doesn't matter. So I can go ahead and edit like in the case of axolotls, the only reason we have albino axolotls is because the albino gene came from tiger salamanders and it was put into axolotls, and that's why they exist. So we already have an example of that in the world. What happens when I can have a 10-way species cross between Uromastyx and Chuckwallas and a ball python in there, like what happens then? It's like we could be talking about, I know a lot of this sounds really futuristic and fantastical, but I don't think it's as far-fetched as some might think. But I could imagine a world in which the already pre-existing uniqueness of herpetoculture as a domestication practice could look even more different because of the rate at which it accelerates and the technologies available to us informing what we do. So another metaphor that I use for this is the advent of photography in art history. So, um, photography popped up like 200 years ago. And when it was invented, it was obvious, okay, this is like a totally new tool to make pictures, and uh, the people who made photography went through the entire textbook for art history. Like, it went through all the same movements just inside photography over the course of 150 years. But that took painting and sculpture and poetry like millennia to unfold, but it happened in like 150 years for photography. I think that's what's probably going to happen with herpetoculture. It's just going to go through this domestication funnel really, really fast and in really different ways, because we have different technologies and different pressures on this particular kind of relationship. Does that make some sense? A
Yeah,
little?
it totally. It's like no matter what we're talking about, the process has the same number of steps, but technology can facilitate the steps to be quicker. So
Yeah.
the photography example is great. It's like it still had to go through this kind of wave of development, but because we had this technology, it was able to happen faster. And now that
Yeah.
the dog domestication happened thousands of years ago, and now we're doing this with reptiles in
Yeah.
an AI age and a computer age, and
Yeah.
who knows what that's going to look like. And I know you spent
Yeah.
some time kind of comparing us to aquaculture or fish keeping. Like,
Yeah.
where do you think we are on? Because that's been a much more ubiquitous in our society for longer, and so they have a longer development arc. Are we like, where do you compare us to them? If you are a regular listener to the podcast and you want to help support the production of the show, make sure you head to patreon.com/animalsathome. For as little as $3 per month, you can help me pay for the service fees that go along with editing and producing the show. And for as little as $5 a month, you have early access to the episodes. Thank you very much for your support. Enjoy the podcast.
Well, so it would be worth being honest here and saying I don't know that much about aquaculture. I know a little bit, like I've done some of it, and my mom had a saltwater aquaria for a while, and I went through a marine biology course in high school and uh, built a little community tank there. So I know a tiny bit, but I think, you know, I feel like it's actually good that you mentioned that, because I think that much of herpetoculture is kind of doing the same thing that aquaculture did like 20, 30 years ago. So now we're starting to get all of these lighting systems
Yes, that's what I was
are
thinking. The
advancing quickly.
technology.
Yeah, the technology side of it is advancing quite snappy at a snappy pace, which is great. Um, I would still love to see more innovation in that space and more like interesting solutions to lighting systems and stuff, not just more smart tech inserted into it, even though that's great. I love that too. But I think there are probably some other cultural ways. Like I'm guessing that aquaculture probably has more well-defined systems that can allow for conservation and the private part of that hobby to interact with the conservation side of that hobby and the zoological side of that hobby. They seem, just from an outsider's perspective, it just seems slightly more integrated than it is in herpetoculture. But I think that the thing that all of these realms could benefit from, whether it's aquaculture or aviculture or uh, beekeeping or all these things, is like just more consideration of the why and how that why informs the choices that we make with the animals. Like in my mind, I put a lot of the systems stuff to the side. And what I mean by that is when it comes to lighting systems or feeding systems, or in the case of aquaculture, like chemical cycles that you have to put things through, all of that is like systematized and is going to continue to develop and get more nuanced with better tech. And that's going to get better all the time. And that's really good. That's a really good thing. It's a net good. But like, I think that when we're talking about like the individual keepers, the people who are doing the propagating, the people who are doing the work that dog breeders did to make it so the people who made golden retrievers 200-300 years ago made it so I can have one now. I think that kind of thought process is more interesting to me personally. I'm much more interested in what are the choices that I can make as a producer and as an educator to make it so the animal and human interaction is prioritized going forward and gets us to really high welfare standards as soon as possible. And I think, again, all of the system stuff, that's a part of it. But it's just one piece. You can have an unbelievably complex and well put together, efficient, crazy system, and put it in an animal that you never interact with, or you just feed, and it's kind of like this display in your house, and that is super, super cool. It's not, I'm not hating on that. I just think that it's more of the interaction between the animal and the person. Like that's where the meat and potatoes of like getting things more interesting. I think that's where it's going to happen, and it overlaps with all the other things.
Yeah.
I hope that's somewhat clear. I'm not
Oh
sure.
yeah, yeah, and it sort of links to the first level of time travel that you talked about is
Yeah.
like our ability to or our need to sort of link and interact with other beings. And I think this sounds kind of far fetched, but being able to look at animals and understand essentially in some ways what they're thinking has also made me a better parent. And I
Yeah.
like I'm very good at setting up an environment for my toddler and making sure that like because I just know in some ways what he's thinking and how he's going to view the world. And I think a lot of it actually comes from doing that with animals first. And it's a little bit harder with animals because especially with reptiles, there's like a species differentiation. So we're not exactly on the same page as them, but you're constantly looking at animals and you can tell like, is this animal going to strike if I stick my hand in there? Is it going to hit?
Yeah.
Like, those type of things. And I swear that's helped me with my own child because
Yeah.
you're just reading another animal and it's even easier on the human scale. But my wife sometimes like, man, how did you like, that was a good idea of how you like redirected him to over this thing and whatever it
Yeah.
is. And to me, it's like extremely, like the back of my hand, like it's second nature.
Feels
And I never
natural.
really thought about it. Yeah. It's natural.
Even with my son, we have dogs and cats, and he is just now starting to learn, like, oh, I need to have a different interaction with the dog and with the cat. So
Mm-hmm.
we're teaching him, like, because recently he started wanting to hit the dog, and we're like, no, you can't hit the dog. You got to be nice. You got to be gentle to the puppy, right? The puppy doesn't like it when you hit them.
Yeah.
Or with the cat doesn't like it when you grab her tail. Like she wants you to just be gentle and pet her head, right? And so now I get to teach him the same thing with the animals. So when I take him downstairs, the thing it's so awesome. The thing he does is he's obsessed. He loves the tortoises that I have and the turtles. So as soon as I'm like, hey, do you want to go downstairs and see the turtles? He goes and he goes, turtle, turtle, turtle. He's just so stoked. But I get to teach him about that animal. And again, that's a different kind of animal. So it may not even be we pet the turtle nicely. It's like we don't pet the turtle. We hand feed the turtle. We clean the turtle. We give the turtle water. Maybe we let it run around. You can touch its head just a little bit, but don't fuck with the turtle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's such a great tool, because you have to know in order to teach him well, but then also you get to watch this kid learn about this is another kind of consciousness, right? This is all Philippe de Vosgely stuff, right? The herpetoculture is a recognition of another kind of consciousness, right? So it's
Yes.
like the idea that it's a recognition, but it's also like the interaction, and it expands your own empathy, because in order to understand the other animal, you have to understand a little bit about what they want and don't want, which means you're exercising all those empathetic pathways in your head. You're like, oh, things are different from me and have different experiences and different feelings. And that's totally cool. Like, that's great. I can respect that. I can engage with that. I don't have to change that. I don't have to project on that. We can both be,
Yeah.
um, Paul Shepard's the man, by the way. Like, Roy was the one who turned me on to him. And I read Coming Home to the Pleistocene, but I've recently read the others, and I've got a couple of his other books, like Animals as Thinkers and stuff like that. Or I think that's maybe I might be messing that title up, but there's a couple other books of his that I'm going to get through here soon that are, oh, they're so good, man.
Okay, I got to get those. I have so many Audible credits on my Audible account. I need to use them because I'm just paying $16 a month for nothing. So I'm gonna have to do that. Get a bunch of his books.
I don't know if his are on Audible because I looked
Oh,
Audible first. Sorry, but I'm reading them physically right
I'm
now.
gonna have
Like,
to read them the old-fashioned way.
oh, they're so good, man. They're well worth it. Really well worth it. You'll just be like stuck on every page. I find I'm highlighting the whole book. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the whole thing is a gem. It's brilliant. You'll love it. You'll love it.
Okay, cool. I'll definitely check that out. I think this is a good time to maybe bring up one of the posts that you had made was kind of discussing the double standard. As we're kind of
Oh,
talking
sure.
about this sort of ethical grounds for keeping reptiles and how important it can be. And I love this like concept of having this respect for another consciousness and this way you can develop that relationship is just so important. And so the double standard, because we are always looked as the weird one and the one that really shouldn't have an experience. Like when I'm talking about us, I mean herpetoculture when compared to fish
Yeah,
keepers or whatever else.
sure.
And so, can you run through that double standard post that you'd made because it was just so well
Yeah.
done?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few ways to break this apart. One really early one that stands out to me is part of the reason so many people give sort of like a cultural pass to other kinds of pets is because they've just been around for longer. It's just a matter of time, just time frame, right? So nobody questions having a dog, but it's like we had to start somewhere to get a dog, right? We started
Yeah.
with a wolf and we have a dog now, but there's, only the most extreme animal rights people think we shouldn't have any pets at all, right? So culturally, nobody will bat an eyelash if you say you have a dog or a cat. It only starts to get into the weirder parts when you say, oh, I have a guinea pig, or I have a ferret, or I have a parrot, or something like that. So that's one double standard, right? Because it's just because reptiles aren't as domesticated doesn't mean it's not still a viable thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the big one for me that always stands out is the issue around invasive animals and the cost of those animals to the native wildlife, which totally fair argument, right? Like invasive stuff is like it's a real problem for native species. Like we could get into a conversation about over very long time horizons, what does all that even mean? Maybe a little bit later, but um, the main one that always comes up for me is plants and cats. Um, Cats are always so many people let them outside. My dad did it. I mean, I know tons of people who let their cats outside all the time. Well, cats are responsible for the decimation of something on the order of like billions of birds, lizards, and rodents every single year, right? These things are not, no one, that's a much bigger problem I think it's probably a bigger scale of problem than pythons in the Everglades. But
Yeah.
pythons in the Everglades get talked about all the time with regard to the exotics industry, and that's not good either. Like I get that that's also a problem, okay? But we also, if we're going to talk about it with pythons, we should talk about it with cats. Like cats are that's a big problem. With plants, we've had this global exchange of horticulture for so many millennia that you can go almost anywhere and there's tons of non-native plants. Like when I go in my backyard and pick weeds, 90% of them are totally non-native,
Yeah.
right? But we don't, only people who study that are actually worried about those things in the way that those non-native plants can suppress or outright outcompete native plant species, right? So it's just not talked about in the same way. We talk about bees. Everybody loves bees. We need bees. Like plant flowers in your garden because we need bees. Well, the honeybee is not native to the North American continent. It's an invasive species. Okay, so like we need it because a massive economic and ecological industry depends on us having honeybees. So we need them, and I definitely think we should protect the bees and like make more bees and stuff. I'm just saying that like all these other things just have a nicer cultural tone to them. So
Yes.
there's this desire to either let this stuff slide or think about it as less of an issue or whatever. So I'm guessing there's probably many different sources for the double standard, right? I'm sure one could go so far as to say that like the Western world, United States and Europe, you could say they have a Judeo-Christian framework for their society on some level, and therefore reptiles are sort of evil, right? Some people get scared of reptiles; it frightens them, right? So you have all these things that might be playing into why exotics catch more flack in general. But I really think much of it is just related to time, because we have lots of other cultural institutions like gambling that aren't exactly Judeo-Christian in a good way, right? So like, but we have that and it's fine. So like, I'm guessing some of it just has to do with time. It's just getting more eyes, and specifically the takeaway here, I think, is that it is every herpetoculturist's responsibility, their obligation to set a good example and to do the best that they can and to show everything they're doing in the best light possible and to act in an ethical way.
Yeah.
So don't scam people, don't mislead them, don't be an asshole, be transparent, the whole thing, right? So again, um, it just leads, I think all roads end up leading back to your ethics. Like if you're doing things in a way that meet some level of ethical standard, well, you're probably on a better path.
Yes, yeah,
So,
yeah, and I guess there's also an element of our hobby, like we have a certain level of unsavory characters who do
oh yeah,
behave in criminal behavior or criminal activity. But and it makes me wonder if we actually do we have a higher proportion of those types of people, or do we just have a higher proportion of unsophisticated criminals in our? Because we have, you see so many things where you're like, are you serious? Like that's what you're going to do. You're going to scam people that way. You're going to treat animals that way. You're going to smuggle, and you just look at it and you go, either we have a higher proportion and they're getting caught, or we have a higher proportion of people that don't know how to do it well enough not to get caught. I can't tell which one it is, but that doesn't paint us in a very good light.
Yeah, that's true. So I know some of it has to be tied to the way that the drug trade has like a brief intertwining history with the reptile trade, right? So
Yes, yeah,
some of it's that. Some of it is also, I think it's going to be related to, like, you have investment bankers who like play markets, and people embezzle money and
totally.
steal and all this stuff. So it happens in every industry, right? You got the bad characters, but like, um, in the same way that you can't have a leopard gecko or a ball python because it without the prerequisite physiological capacity, right? So part of what makes some of these like super popular uh like evergreen reptiles is the fact that they can produce so much, right? You can get like 100 bearded dragons out of one female in a year. Like that's crazy. So there's some level of like certain species are going to be more predisposed to the big morph market, right? Um, I think with reptiles, part of it is that reptiles are an easy vector for some of these things, right? People who want to launder their money, they can do so through reptile sales, right? People who are if there's already stuff that it has like a lot of regulation, not much legal trade, and high black market value, you're going to get people who get in there because the money outweighs the criminal punishment to some degree, right?
Yeah.
That's why you have like black market weed dealers and like, coke dealers and stuff like this, is because, half of it is because there's no legal framework for that, and zero regulation because it's just an outright ban. And then some of it is because these are ways for people to, again, either to launder their money or to make money tax free or whatever. So like, unfortunately, I think that sometimes some of the answers to those problems kind of defy some of the more libertarian sensibilities in my personality. Like it's
Yes,
going to
yeah.
more regulation, more oversight, and more bureaucracy. And so like that's a bummer. But I'm happy to trade some of that bureaucracy for just fewer criminals and fewer assholes. Like, I mean, think about how weird it is that like you have to show your ID to buy a beer, but you can just be 18 and go buy a croc monitor.
Yeah.
It's like you don't even have to show your ID really. Like you could just go buy it, right? It's
Yeah.
like that's probably not right. There probably should be some kind of hoop you have to jump through to get an animal, maybe, right? And again, I hesitate saying some of this stuff because I also like capitalist and like free market guy. Like I get all that too. I understand that side of the argument. I'm all for that. There's got to be some answer to the fact that there's no fallout other than reputational for like completely selling half dead animals to 500 people across the nation, and then when they try to get help from you, you just stop talking to them, or like, somebody scams you out of 15 grand for uh two male shingleback skinks when you thought you were getting a pair or something, and they knew it was two males all along, and they just lied to you because they knew you couldn't sex them, or who knows, right? Like whatever it is, like there's so many ways that people just get away with that kind of thing.
Yes.
And if you can get away with it, go for it. I mean, I know people now who have started saying that they think they're getting scammed by an AI. Like someone's trained an AI bot to scam people for lizards, because I have a friend who was scammed out of like 5 grand trying to buy a pair of Pilbara rock monitors, and he had no recourse. There was no way for him to get that money back. He was just
So he sent the money somewhere and then it just disappeared. No contact after that.
yep. Yeah,
Damn.
it's like there was no recourse. And so how crazy is that? That's not a thing in many other places. Like there's some recourse for you in most of these other circumstances, right? So like if you buy a plant from a nursery and it gets, it dies, you can just go get your money back or something, or they'll give you another plant or like whatever it is. But as it is now, with reptiles, like there's no reward structure or punishment structure put in place to prevent that stuff happening, other than
Yes.
reputation cost.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That is a challenge that we have to deal with, and and it, like it said, like it makes a viral story. Now everybody's hearing about this, whatever it is, and it doesn't help any of us out. But I think I think the double standard piece is just really important to talk about. I think particularly the cat thing that you mentioned is so good because
That's a big one.
the plants and the bees, you could argue that there's such a net value because of the whatever we're growing crops
sure.
but the cats just essentially serve a companion purpose at this point. And how, like, I guess if you were to measure like the biomass that they destroy compared to the biomass of the Burmese pythons in the Everglades, it would be
Unreal.
Astronomically different. And they get a total free pass, and we have to constantly talk about pythons in the Everglades.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm I also have like these weird, probably not accurate thoughts about like, if you zoom out long enough, everything's invasive, sort of.
Yes,
You know what I mean? Like, when did a Fiji iguana become native to Fiji and is no longer an invasive iguana that just showed up on this island, right? Or like the dingo in Australia is always a good example, because they didn't evolve in Australia, but they showed up like 10,000 years ago, and now they're like kind of an understood part of like the naturalized fauna, right? And I don't deny that invasives can cause huge problems, and it's great cost in terms of like native fauna. I get it. Like I'm not arguing that at all, but like there's a guy, I'm forgetting his name. I think it's Charles C. Mann, Mann with two N's. He had this really interesting talk I heard him give once, where he was discussing how something like 75, and again, I'm probably butchering all these numbers, so like bear with me, but the thrust of the argument still is what's valuable here. Something like 75% of the organisms in the San Francisco Bay are not native. Like they just didn't evolve there, right? And part of how they came here is in the ballasts of ships. So they would fill their ballast when they left Japan and then empty it in when they got to San Francisco or something. Or another example would be dirt, right? So like along with the honeybee, another non-native animal to the North American continent is the earthworm, not native, right? But that came over.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, and they're all over, and that came over in the ballast of a ship, right? So it's like that's because they emptied the dirt here, and some of that's related to the tobacco trade, and then like the tire trade down in Brazil, and all this other, or the rubber trade or whatever. But there's all this stuff, right? So the reality is that like the globe on whole is a constantly changing and influx kind of singular contained organism, and I take issue with the idea that something that a human changes is not native or natural. I mean, we are native to this planet. We were made here. We've evolved here. We do things here. Now, doesn't mean that we're not doing horrible things to the earth and that we shouldn't stop. We definitely should figure it out. But like the point is that there are ways of learning about the world around us that can help contribute to science in such a way that when our semi-AI utopia comes to be, we can learn how to make the planet a more productive and amazing biosphere. Okay. And so, I've even been toying around with trying to come up with ideas of like, how could I justify to Elon Musk that like when they go to Mars, they should bring some reptiles? I mean, like it's so dumb and fantastical, but like that's kind of where my head's at, because there's going to be something there. Like there's going to be something. Somebody's going to find something in a frog, or like pull Ozempic out of a Gila monster, or like whatever. And it turns out it's going to be perfect for the Martian existence or something,
Is that where
But
did you say pull Ozempic out of a Gila monster? Is that?
I'm I'm pretty sure. Yeah, let me just confirm this.
I mean, most people are aware that venom in either snakes or lizards is often used to create pharmaceuticals, but I didn't realize that Ozempic kit had come from potentially.
I think so. Let me just. This will just take me a
We'll,
second.
we'll do a fact check live on the
Yeah,
air.
yeah. Live fact check right now because I'm pretty sure that's true. Um,
I wouldn't be
yeah,
surprised.
yeah. Indirectly. So Ozempic is not made from Gila monster venom, but its creation was inspired by a compound found in the saliva.
Right.
So the short story is that in the 1990s, scientists discovered that a hormone-like compound in Gila monster saliva called exendin-4, which mimicked a human hormone, GLP-1. That GLP-1 plays a key role in regulating blood sugar. And then exendin-4, by contrast, lasted longer in the bloodstream than whatever the other compound was, and made a compelling model for a new class of diabetes drugs. So that's
That's where it came
super,
from.
super cool, right? Like
Very cool. Yeah.
super, super cool. But Gila monsters are both kind of sort of protected and sort of legal. I don't even know really. Like you can't get them from the wild, but you can trade in them. I don't have any idea how Gilas work, but super cool, right? But this is, dude, this is all over the place. I wrote the cochineal, the cochineal. Have you ever heard of the cochineal?
Is that the that little red thing?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Tell
yeah.
tell us what that is. Yeah.
So the cochineal is this tiny little mite that parasitizes cactus. And turns out that millennia ago, all the natives in Central and South America learned that if you take the females of the cochineal develop a type of compound in them that is bright red, like ruby red. And so it turned out if you desiccate the female cochineal and then you crush them up, you make a great red dye.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out that there's a color compound called carmine red that is a result of crushed cochineal. It's just powdered cochineal, and it's in like all different candies and anything, a lot of things that have red.
That's like
It
your red velvet cake. Like all those things are dyed with
Yeah,
red. Yeah.
yeah. So interestingly, there was a brief period of time. So this, if you grew up in the 90s, you remember like the red dye problem, like food coloring is like a big problem. And it's because they went from using these cochineal colorings to using artificial ones because they were cheaper and didn't require that you use a crushed parasite, basically. But then it turned out there was a lot of like health issues linked to that. So they said you can't use these dyes anymore. And so now Central America and parts of South America all over have these massive cactus plantations where they seed cochineal females um, onto the cactus with a little tiny little basket about yay big made out of dried agave leaves. And they seed it so the females lay their eggs and the babies hatch inside that little thingy, and then the babies eat and parasitize the cactus, and then they harvest all the females and crush them up and make this red dye. And it's on the order of like 1 trillion of these things exported all every year.
Wow.
A parasite,
That's
you know?
crazy.
I mean, dude, this is the kind of thing like when people talk about protecting the rainforests because of all the possible plant medicines that we can garner from them, that's not that different than it's not much of a leap to say that there will be some kinds of scientific breakthroughs that will come as a result of herpetoculture. Like it's going to happen.
Yes. Well, I mean, we could point to many examples of it already. The
Yeah.
Ozempic one for one of them,
Yep.
right? It's
Yeah.
right there for you.
Exactly. I mean, I mentioned the axolotl earlier. The axolotl is another one that I wrote an article about because their history is just absolutely mind blowing. The axolotl was first imported to France in like the 1800s, like or like 1875 or something, and they became an instant hit, and the entire population of the entire global population of axolotls for a time descended from something like 6 individuals. Six,
Wow.
six, dude. And again, they're the first GMO herp, right? They've got the albino that came from the tiger salamander. So all axolotls now carry tiger salamander DNA, but they also have a glow in the dark axolotl, just like the glow in the dark fish. So that's like a GMO herp, you know. They're all over the place, but they're virtually non-existent in their wild habitat now. And their big stronghold is a nunnery in
Yes.
Mexico that basically has the bulk of the protection there. And there's all these efforts to like reintroduce them and get them back in these places where they were before. And it is an unbelievably interesting story. And you just let enough time unfold, and that's going to happen with a bearded dragon. Somebody's going to find like, yeah, it turns out, you know, I don't know, the snout from a bearded dragon is like really useful or something. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just fucking around, but
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Same thing with the feeder and the mouse feeder articles. Those ones, you know, you just learn about the history of all of this, and it just baffles you. Like it's completely bizarre, you know?
Yeah, yeah, you did that. You did an article about the history of basically feeder cricket
Yep.
insects, and kind of focusing on crickets and everything else that comes. And it's one of those things that now, when we're in it, you take it for granted. You just go, you go to the store, you buy your crickets, you buy your mealworms, and you don't really think of it as just. It's weird. You think of them as food for reptiles, but you don't just think of it as it just happens to be a random insect that was chosen
Yeah.
thousands, whatever decades ago, whatever it was. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, for sure. So it was crickets, mealworms, and waxworms were the first ones. And it started really, really early in like the 1910s with like people cultivating those animals for bait, for fishing bait.
That's right. Yeah.
Then during World War II, the US government and the US Department of Agriculture developed all the methodologies to scale up insect cultivation. And they did so under the guise of like studying disease transmission, because during the war, a lot of the soldiers based in the Pacific were dying from mosquito-borne illnesses more than like as much as they were from the gunfire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this was part of it. But then when the war ended, the USDA basically distributed all of that information to people who wanted it. A lot of people did it for poultry, and then again for the bait industry. And so then people took the scaling methods that the government had developed and then brought that into the private sector. And so then again, it was for poultry, for bait, and then aviculture comes in. So you have birds and bird keepers coming into that world. And then in like around 1970 or so, like approximately give or take 1970 is when herpetoculture really comes into that, and people start to see all these other ways that it could be useful for this, so again, it's like it's herpetoculture co-opting an existing structure that was already there, but there was never any consideration given to whether or not these are appropriate food sources for the animals that we're keeping. It just so happened that they ate it, and a lot of them do just fine, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't feed crickets or something, but there's that. And it wasn't until the last like 30, 40 years that you had the introduction of the superworm, the introduction of black soldier fly larvae, hornworms, silkworms, which was obviously co-opted from silk producing silk, right? And then you have what are some of the like dubia roaches and like isopods, all this stuff kind of came up much, much more recently, like 20 years ish ago, right? So there's not a lot of thought that's been given to like whether or not these are the right things or like the appropriate thing. And then the same thing for feeder rodents. That goes all the way back to like 1700s Japan, Edo period Japan. They were breeding waltzing mice, which were like the mice that spin. And then that spread from Japan to Victorian England, where the queen even like had rats, and it was like became this popular thing for people to keep fancy rats and like pet rats and mice and stuff. And then when it made its way to the USA, then it became, oh, we can standardize this breeding so that way we can have dependable lab mice and rats, you
Right.
know? And so then the lab mice and rat thing bled over into zoological institutions, and then from there into herpetoculture, you know? And now the rat and mouse industry is a massive global industry, like millions and millions and millions of rodents frozen, moving all across the globe. A ton of them. There's some speculation they're all coming from China now. Like China is undercutting US rodent production by doing it for way cheaper. Like, of course, China's doing right. Yeah, let's go,
Yeah,
China.
yeah.
Yeah, but so like, but again, they're all descended from lab strain rodents. They bear almost no resemblance to the wild counterpart in any way, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so it's like there's none of these are built for like making better reptiles or making them better for reptiles necessarily. So like on some level, I think the future of herpetoculture looks a lot more like herpetoculture of 1960 or 70, where in order to do it, you had to get really, really creative and really know those animals in and out to get an understanding of what they needed. You had to be resourceful. You had to learn how to capture natural things like sunlight or other ways of getting UVA, UVB, and D3 to the animals. You had to get more creative about what you feed them. You know, we had a podcast on Project Herpetoculture with one of the guys, gentleman in Europe, I think Germany. Forgive me if I can't remember, but he's breeding the horned lizards, Phrynosoma.
I was just gonna to reference him. I had him on my show as well, and
Yeah,
it's like that's a DIY. Go outside with a bucket and a shovel and go get your ants.
exactly. You know, it was your show actually. It wasn't ours. It was yours.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but exactly. Like having to go out there and get them yourself. That's wild. You know, that's like, but you know, it's either that or do what someone like Dean Missimer is doing with Feed My Chameleon and scaling up grasshopper and katydid and leaf bug production because they're going to be a better feeder for most of our diurnal reptiles anyway. You
Right.
know, um, I've been talking about this in a couple of places and it's a terrible idea, but I'm still gonna play around with it because who knows? I think there's good justification for finding a way to bring beekeepers into herpetoculture because there are many, many, many insectivorous reptiles where certain parts of the year all they eat is bees. Like 80% of their diet can be bees and wasps. Like
Really?
hanging out, yeah. Like hanging out in your flowers and taking
Yeah.
them out, right? So I think there's justification to say, how do we scale? Because we all need honeybees, right? We need them for almonds and for all the other foods we eat to pollinate and whatever. Scale up bees, and we're going to take all the drones, which don't sting, and all the excess workers, and we can funnel them into herpetoculture. Now, of course, they sting. So it's not going to be the kind of thing you throw a bunch of bees into your cage and hope you don't get stung, right? But we already have freeze-dried crickets, grasshoppers, mealworms, like dead ones, desiccated ones that you can feed to chickens, you can feed to geckos. Lots of lizards will eat them because they recognize their food, even if they're already desiccated. You
Yeah.
could do the same thing with bees, you know, and I could imagine that's a more naturalistic food source. But there's already a pre-existing framework for having bees at scale. So somebody could figure that out and probably make a whole bunch of money. It won't be me, but I don't know, maybe I will. Maybe I'll change careers.
Yeah. That could be your next project. No, I mean it's hard to look at these things from an outsider's perspective because when you come into the hobby, you go get your bag of 10 crickets or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and it's all you see is like that is reptile food. When it's I even when I first started keeping maybe like 15 years ago, whatever it was, the thought of going outside and catching your own bugs, if you posted that somewhere online, that would be terrible. Like you couldn't, you don't never do that. You're going to kill your animal. It's like you got to go buy them from the store. Where now we're starting to get back to that. What's that?
They got to be safe or sterilized somehow.
Yeah, and of course there's like the pesticide issue and all that. But that aside. Now we're kind of getting back to that where it's like you should go outside and see if you. I mean, I used to collect moths all the time for my day gecko, and she would chase those around and grab them. And it's actually harder to catch insects than you think. They're all over the place, and then suddenly when you try to grab them, you can't catch them. So that's a learning experience in itself.
Yeah, well, so a couple of things about that. One is like you're much more likely to get a disease infection from a cricket or a mealworm that you bought from a store than you are from a wild animal because it's just like with cows, pigs, chickens, and sheep and stuff. They're crowded in farms. Yeah, they're farmed. The cricket is just as domesticated as anything else. Same thing with the mealworm. Super domesticated critters that nobody thinks about except unless you're flukers. but that's more likely. And I mean, that's probably not going to happen. But if it's going to happen, more likely that your animal caught hookworm from the cricket than from the grasshopper you caught it outside. Right.
Yeah.
But getting a simple butterfly net that can change your whole life. Just running that thing through a field, walking through it, kicking your porch light on, and when the sun goes down, going out there and catching moths with the net. You can go mothing. If anyone doesn't know what mothing is, this is the coolest thing in the world. You go out on a to like a big open space or a field or like BLM land at night, and you hang a sheet on like a curtain, and then or like a drying rack. You hang a sheet on it and put a big light in the middle of it, and all these moths will land on the, because they think it's the moon, so they'll land on the big sheet that's glowing, and you can just see the cool different bugs that come up that you didn't know lived in your area. So it's just a great way to get more familiar with the world around you. But it's also a good, easy way to catch you can catch a million Miller moths doing that. And
Yeah.
it's great, because those things migrate and go through here. I mean, they come through Colorado like crazy, those Miller moths, but you can get those. The lizards love them. They love Miller moths, right? And that's way better than anything you're going to get at the store. So at some point, I do think so. Again, I think a lot of the future of herpetoculture looks more like that, like more local, like how do I've been, okay, I'm going to say this again, and I keep saying it like a joke, but it's starting to become like a real thing that I think is like useful. I've been saying that I keep in racks, RACS, which stands for resource aware care systems. So it's so stupid, but it's true, right? So this isn't something that's obvious to many people, but it, like, giving it an acronym, it can be helpful. So like a resource aware care system is a care system that takes into account all the resources at your disposal in the place that you're keeping that care system, right? So that can be everything from I'm aware of the rising heat in my enclosure that's underneath another, so I use a lower wattage bulb on that upper enclosure. So that's a simple example. A more complex example would be for 5 or 6 months out of the year, I pick 3 or 4 different species of weed in the backyard that I, through research, have determined are very, very similar nutritionally to wild plants that Uromastyx eat in the wild. And I feed those for 5 months out of the year. A more advanced version would be someone like Ron and Heather down in Florida, Fairy Tale Dragons, who are keeping their animals outside, and they are capturing a bunch of the natural abundance of sunlight and weather and insects and plant food, and coupling that with artificial pieces of that system to make it a very, very rich resource aware care system. Does that all track?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing I've been saying. So I think a lot of the future of herpetoculture is a real development of and focus on a resource aware care system for you.
Yes, I think that's really well said. I think that shifts the focus not away from the animal in a way, but it sort of does. It directs us from like the animal in the deli cup to the entire system, which I think is, that's a big part of this entire podcast, is really thinking about everything. It's like the holistic approach, not just, and I think that's one of the problems with actual RACK, the real racks, is that it's just, you're just looking at the animal itself. You've kind of distilled the entire practice down to the specific animal rather than the entire system. And I think your version of racks really will, and I think that's exactly right. I think we'll start seeing that a lot more. And I think that's what people actually want more of. People who are jumping into the hobby now, they're just getting into that in that capacity, and it's really cool to see. So hopefully that's what we start seeing more of.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I think it's something you already see, like most of the people who do this as a business, they're already doing all of this, right? Like it makes sense when you're operating at scale, you have to understand every aspect of your system. So that way you can make sure you're not spending money where you shouldn't be, or where you're losing production, or where you're losing health span for your breeders, or like whatever it may be. Right. But I think that I think there's reason. I actually even had this on my website for a while. I took it down because I'm not sure it's the right time for it yet, but I was briefly offering what I called herpetocultural consulting. And it was basically a way of saying, like, I will help you determine areas where your care system can be more resource aware, but it's in a synergistic way. So it's not just better for me as the keeper. It's meant to be, how does that care system synergistically favor you and the animal, right? So like, not just saving you money, but giving your animal a better health span, because there's lots of ways to do that. And I think that there's a reason for that, because again, if you wish to do it as a business, there's no formal education or structure on how to make it a business in the first place. There's no, you have to develop a lot of relationships and go through a lot of problem solving and question and answer with people who charitably give you their time and their expertise because you called them on the phone, and I think that's great. And I think it's good that we have that. But I think there's a world where someone who decides like, okay, I've decided I'd really like to make this a thing. Well, they can call me and we can I can consult with you for a year, either on a new venture or on one that you already have, because I've done this, I might have a fresh set of eyes on what you're doing in a way that you might be missing, right? So you might not notice that you're doing this thing. Well, if you did it with a slight change, you'd get the same result for less price and your animals would benefit. There's all kinds of stuff for this. I mean, I have a student of mine at the Jiu-Jitsu Academy. He owns a business where he cultivates mushrooms and sells them for various purposes. And I had him come over because I was like, I want your eyes on this, because maybe there's some container or concept in growing mushrooms that crosses over into herpetoculture that I don't know about. Like, I'd really like to know, and so, this is sort of the whole, we've talked about this in the past, which is like looking at adjacent industries and saying, what can I pull from this, and I think that's part of it, is like finding people like that and just like cultivating a relationship and just saying, how do you grow oyster mushrooms? That's really weird. Like, why do you do it that way? Like how do you do that? There's just so many cool things. And what I'm really excited is when I get to be like 75 or 80 or something, then I can write about the history of individual species in herpetoculture, like right now you could do that, but it would take a lot of time and documentation to understand, like, how did the first bearded dragons get here? And how did they go from that to what they are now? How did the first ball pythons get here? How did they go from that to what they are now? And most of it's not standardized. It's all just mostly rumor mill, like, oh yeah, I was there when the first whatever came in and this guy bought them and he bought the imports for $1,000. And then for 2 years they sat on his table after they proved it out for 10 grand and nobody bought them. And then 1 year they went and took off and all of a sudden everybody wanted them. It's like, that's an interesting history, something to be learned there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a fascinating kind of line of thinking, and hopefully maybe at some point in the future you do bring that option back for people to consult with you and for you to kind of bounce ideas, because I think that's really clever.
I still do it.
Oh, you do still do it?
I'll still do it.
Oh yeah, you'll still do it. Yeah. Hopefully you don't get a million people reaching out to you, but yeah, I think that's really, really cool. Phil, as always, we have such interesting conversations, and you're always thinking about things on such a deep level. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we wrap up?
Oh man, I think I pretty much spit it all out there. I feel like I always, even when I go onto a show and I feel like, sometimes I'll get asked to go on a show and people want to talk about Euros and I'm like, yeah, I'll talk about Euros, but I always find a way of like pushing it back towards these other things. And one of the things that I like about talking with you is I don't have to even worry about that. I can just dive right into the,
We did the Euros. The Euros are out there. We got a great episode. It's like over 100,000, way over 100,000 people have watched that episode. So that's out there for people that want to listen to it. Go to the first one. But it's good to be able to get into these topics too.
Yeah, thanks, man. No, I don't think I have anything else.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll make sure everything's in the show notes. People know where to find you, but I'll make sure all the Instagram and websites all in there. So until next year, you keep thinking of stuff, and we'll have time to chat about it. So thank you so much for being here. All right, that is the end of that episode. Phil, thank you so much for dropping on to another episode. As always, I really enjoy your thoughts, and you spend a lot of time thinking about these things, and it's just fascinating to have somebody to discuss these topics with, because I do know the listeners enjoy it as well. So listeners, thank you so much for being here and listening to the show and watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure you share it on social media. If you'd like to support the show, you can head to animalsathome.ca/shop and pick yourself up a t-shirt or a sweater. $5 does automatically get donated to the Amazon Rainforest Conservancy, or you can head to patreon.com/animalsathome and join us there. And there's some perks. You can look at the tiers. And of course, the money that I receive from Patreon helps me continue to produce the show. And I think that is it for this week, everybody. Thank you so much. I guess I should say now, I will be moving. I forget if I mentioned it in the podcast, but at some point I'm going to be moving in the next few weeks, my time. So I don't know exactly when you're going to be listening to this specific episode. It'll probably be sometime early August. I'm going to be moving early August, so there may be a gap, is what I'm trying to say. Or sometime later this fall or this summer, you might see a gap. The entire set is going to look different in the new place. So wish me luck on that. We have lots going on at home, so I'm trying to balance as much as I can. So if you do see a gap in the episodes, it's simply due to the fact that I'm relocating, we're moving. I have 2 children now instead of just 1, so they come with lots of stuff, and my job is going to change slightly in the fall as well. So I've got lots on my plate, and I do plan on continuing to make sure the episodes of the podcast get produced and put out, just maybe slightly slower in kind of August, September, October type thing. All right. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and I will catch you in the next one.